Thank you, Frank. And it's a great privilege to be here and share the time with the congressman and all of you. It's good always to be among patriots. And I especially appreciate Tommy's pledge to the flag and your unfurling the flag here, which is a battleground, truly is a battleground. To echo both Frank and Peter, you know, well, it's a battleground here. I don't know how else to say it. Washington is failing us, and I think we're foolish if we imagine that somehow in the next session of Congress, with all due respect, this is going to change. It really is, I believe, up to the people of this country at the local level and the state level, and bottom line of mine, working through our National Guard to begin to build a network from the bottom up to deal with this critical problem. That's an underlying theme of what I want to tell you. I will be meshing in with things Peter has already said. Go ahead to the first chart, which summarizes a few of the key issues I want to leave on your plate. Man-made EMP is well understood. I don't intend to read the charts, and I'm going to rely on the pictures for you to see. I don't think you can read the charts either if my eyes are not failing me. But it will be on the web page, and I've intended for them to be sort of standalone charts so you can read them and get my main messages. Part of the reason I say that is because in the 1960s I was at the Air Force Weapons Laboratory during the time period when we discovered the electromagnetic pulse from a high-altitude nuclear explosion called Starfish Prime, which was detonated some 900 miles south and east, I guess you'd call it, or of Hawaii. And it turned out the lights in Hawaii caused critical damage. I worked on Telstar at Bell Laboratories in the early 60s, our first telecommunication satellite. It caused critical damage to our satellites, and a number that managed to survive the effects died within weeks, and that was in a time period when we only had a few satellites up. Today we've got many up. The damage caused in Hawaii was in the era of vacuum tubes. There's an older group here that will remember what vacuum tubes are. Most of Americans today don't even know what vacuum tubes were. And the solid state physics upon which all of our electric systems work today, your cars, your cell phone, everything else, the SCADAs that Peter mentioned, those systems are more vulnerable than were the vacuum tube systems in Hawaii. So we well understand this effect. At the time, we discovered that our strategic systems were vulnerable. Our ICBMs, our long-range missiles, whether based on land or in submarines at sea, our bombers, our communication systems that allowed the president to command those forces, SINCSAC in those days as the boss of the forces, for him to deal with it. They were all vulnerable. Consequently, this problem became super classified, top secret, special access only kinds of folks. I was privileged to be among those people working at the weapons lab and other places, and I can assure you we understood the nature of the effects a half century ago and set upon major programs to protect those systems upon which our fundamental strategy depended. So if the Soviets ever attacked us, we'd be able to respond. The president could return to retaliate that attack. Now, it remained classified, and this is part of our problem today, until 2008. And the commission upon which Peter served not only made very important recommendations, but they prevailed upon the powers that be in the Congress to declassify that information. And it's available on their webpage and a number of others. I'm sure Frank's has it, mine has it, Peter's webpage has it. So it's available to anybody to read, to understand the nature of the effect and what you can do to protect against it. Unfortunately, we're simply not doing that. The other item on this chart, of course, is the picture of National Geographic. Well understood. That's the point of having the picture there. The cable TV folks have also run major programs on this. It exists, and it's going to happen. It's just an issue of when. And it provides, as I'm sure Dr. Baker will talk about after me, a component of the same EMP threat produced by nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapon has other effects as well. But this one is sufficient to couple energy into the electric grid, focus it on the substations, and damage the extra high voltage transformers that Peter referred to that we can't replace currently. And the sun is going to do it one day. We're either going to be ready or not, and we're not ready today. There are key initiatives in my mind. I've already mentioned the National Guard. I say them because they have special responsibilities to the governors, as you know. And they have special license, in fact, to work many problems, to be prepared to deal with these issues that they don't have under their Title 10, their DOD responsibilities. This makes them a vehicle for working the problem. And they're also interneted into the whole network of Northern Command, which is where these issues are supposed to be focused to protect the American people. Peter referred to Admiral Gortney, and I'm going to come back to him in a little bit. But that's one of the key themes I want to leave with you, and I believe there's a way to work this issue through the Guard. You need to make sure in your state that someone is responsible at the state level for dealing with this, and that doesn't, I don't mean the governor. Of course, the governor is responsible. Most states have emergency responders, organizations for that. Your National Guard usually reports in through the Adjutant General. I don't know whether there are any exceptions to that. My choice would be to make, therefore, the Adjutant General the primary guy responsible for protecting your state. Do exercises, be prepared, and let that go all the way down to the mayors, to the police, to the firemen, to the folks that plant their own gardens. I've moved back to the farm in South Carolina, in part, to do that. This is a serious matter. This is not hyperbole, it's not hypothetical. And this is a problem pointed out here that's going to happen in one case, and very well could, much more rapidly than most people think, and certainly more rapidly than we're prepared to deal with. Next chart. This is just to illustrate. This is the President's airplane. If what you see up above is what the EE folks call a dipole, it creates a field over the aircraft. It's intended to test the aircraft to make sure that it's survivable. That's the whole point of the chart. Just emphasize again that we are worrying about this for our strategic systems, for our military systems. We know how to fix the electric grid. We're just not doing it. I've already said these other matters. Next chart. Who's doing the charts, or how do I do it? Oh, there we go. The picture up on the right-hand side is Northern Command out in Colorado Springs. This is where the network comes together. Admiral Gortney gave a press conference, again, that Peter referred to, about the $700 million program that he's going back into the mountain, Cheyenne Mountain, to harden our systems in there to assure that they can be supportive in the case of an EMP attack on the United States of America. His purpose in doing this is to do his NORAD job, which is his DOD job. See, the DOD doesn't have a responsibility today to protect you, the American people. Posse Comitatus restricts its ability to do so in any case, another reason why the National Guard is key to working this problem. He also is the commander of Northern Command, which is supposed to be the command that worries about the American people, citizens of the country, and protecting them. But that job is not being done today, and we can speculate on why that is or why it is not, but it can't be because he doesn't understand that EMP is a threat. He is, in fact, gave a press conference and in answer to questions really made it very clear that he is concerned about EMP insofar as his NORAD job is concerned, and that is to assure that the President can command these strategic forces like from that airplane that I showed you earlier. SINCSAC had one, and the guys out at Stratcom do today. They have aircraft to make sure we can communicate with our submarines and so on. So we worry to make sure our military can retaliate if the United States is destroyed. That doesn't give you much comfort in the world we face today. It made sense when we were dealing with what we refer to as a rational opponent, the Soviet Union, that wanted to continue. May even be effective with North Korea, but I don't believe it has much import when it comes to dealing with Iran. For example, that's a society that's willing to commit suicide to bring death to Americans, as you know, and this is one way to do it. Well, Peter already said the other things. Next chart. This is to point out or to make the connection specifically to Iran. Trent Franks, who chairs the EMP caucus in the House of Representatives, representative from Arizona, and I think he also chairs the Missile Defense Caucus, if I'm not mistaken. Last week at a conference in Washington, which was the annual Electrical Infrastructure Security Summit, which is hosted by the United States and UK on alternate years. It was in Washington this year. Involves the Israelis and others. It involves electric power companies who take part. And I'm not going to read the entire quote here, but this is a quote from an official document, Iranian document, that was published in 2010, which basically says they're going to use EMP as part of their fundamental doctrine and strategy to attack their enemies. Read the United States of America and Israel. So there is no doubt that these people understand the issue, and that's not a surprise either, because the Russians passed the information to the Chinese, who passed it to North Korea, who passed it to Iran. Iran is present at all the North Korean tests, and so on. So, I mean, this is again, a reality. Next chart. That was to make the point that Iran wants to do it. This chart is intended to make the point that if they wish, they've already been practicing to do so. Just this past February, they launched their 4th satellite. Most people don't understand this threat that I'm going to emphasize. It's on the back of one of the items on your table, or one of the other tables that I wrote about. It's a distraction. The Iranian debate really is a distraction about an existing threat from Iran, not what might come when that deal is consummated some 10 years hence, but an existing problem today because the satellites that Iran has launched. 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember exactly when now, it's mentioned in the article, they launched a monkey into space on a satellite that weighed 4,400 pounds, which is many times more payload, much more payload than is required to carry a nuclear weapon. And if you intend to detonate that weapon over the United States, high altitude above the atmosphere, you don't have to re-enter the atmosphere. That's the end objective in any case. That means you don't have to address the technological problem of building re-entry vehicles or to come back in, which means it's just a matter of putting the bomb on the satellite and setting it off when it comes over the United States. And we have no defense against that today, gentlemen, ladies. Absolutely none. I don't believe we have even the sensors in place to track the threat that comes to the United States from the South. We focused during the Cold War on Mother Russia and weapons launched out of the Soviet Union over the North Pole. And when you read the newspapers today talking about the Iranian threat or the North Korean threat, they're talking about ICBMs. They're talking about missiles that come over the North Pole. Big argument about building a 3rd ground-based interceptor site, perhaps here in your state, if not here in Maine or somewhere else, all the way out to Ohio. I usually mention that probably correlates to the Speaker of the House somehow. I don't know how that qualifies as an East Coast site otherwise. So in any case, I don't want to argue against defending against that, but we should be defending against this threat from the south as well. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. The right-hand picture is just to illustrate, reemphasize what Peter said about the exercise that was carried out in the Gulf of Mexico a couple of years ago, well, last year, in fact. Launches from vessels off our coast. Again, defenseless against this today. Next chart. Okay. This is a picture of what we could do if we wish. The stars around the Gulf of Mexico is where I would argue we should be deploying what's referred to as Aegis Ashores, taking the interceptors and the command and control system off of our cruisers and destroyers, some 35 of which are now deployed around the world to defend our lives and our fleet, of course. And it's being deployed, will be operational at the end of this year in Romania and the end of 2018 in Poland to protect our European allies from attacks from Iran. If we put on some selected military bases the same systems that don't need to be developed, they just need to be purchased and put there, and we have to get by the the environmental impact statement and that sort of world in order to do so, but we know how to do it. We don't have to develop this system. You just have to buy the material and put out there what we're deploying in Europe today. No program to do this either, not even acknowledged as a threat. Next chart. One other thing I mentioned on there, hooking back to the Guard and my interest in South Carolina, most people don't know it, but there's an organization, the 263rd Army Air and Missile Defense Command in South Carolina, which has a key role in the defense of the entire country, including the national capital region. And so that networks in, they report to NORTHCOM by a couple of routes, including as a direct report. This chart is Peter's picture again of the some 10,730 power plants around the country. Notice where most of them are. They create 75% of the electric power for the country. Some 9 of them present the existential threat if they were attacked and brought down singly, cascading failures. Next chart. This chart shows you where the nuclear reactors around the country are. Again, you'll notice the right side of that chart is where most of them are. The way things are arranged today, if the grid is shut down for any extensive period of time, actually almost immediately, those reactors shut down. And once they're shut down, they need electricity to restart. That electricity is provided by diesel generators with enough fuel to last maybe a week. So if you lose the grid, the cascading effect is, if you lose the grid for an indefinite period, is you can't cool the water in the reactor or in the spent fuel pools outside the reactor. And what you potentially have is Fukushima at some 100 locations around the country, most of which are in the right side of this chart. Just imagine what the winds will do to carry that radiation. On the other hand, and this is the important fact I wanted to get to and I'll quit, if we did the right things with the reactors, the uranium in those reactors provide the power to not only reestablish them and keep some local power going, but they could become the basis for restoring the electric grid. Some 20% of the nation's electricity comes from those reactors. When you don't have anything, 20% is not bad. And in the case of South Carolina, it's 60%, and we're building 2 more reactors. I don't know exactly what the situation is in New Hampshire. Tom Popick can tell you that. But I believe this should be the top priority thing we try to fix. And I believe it's a challenge for our universities and the EE departments and the ME departments there to make it happen. If Hyman Rickover, who built our first commercial reactor, as well as the Nautilus, our first submarine, and we've never had a problem, so far as I know, with our sea-based reactors. If he had survived and designed our systems, he wouldn't have created this circumstance that we're living with today, I believe. I think he was too good an engineer. But I don't think it's too big of a challenge to figure out how to harden that, and then I'll leave George Baker maybe to deal with it later. Next chart. I don't want to even go through this chart. I left with you also what basically is a summary of it on another piece of paper here, what we're trying to do in South Carolina. I do want to say two things and I'll get off. To the question of what you can do, you can't underestimate what one person can do. You really shouldn't and should never give up. My son, who is interested in politics, persuaded Bryce Reeves, who was running to unseat and successfully did so, a 30-year Democrat in Virginia, persuaded him that this was an important issue. And Bryce was able to get unanimously passed in the state of Virginia a bill to study and decide what to do about this issue. We learned last week at the same conference that the Dominion Electric Power Company in Virginia is actually beginning to take initiatives to deal with the issue. It's not a done deal. It's not, but one individual working with another individual, and the cascading effects, I believe, is putting Virginia on the path to success. And we hope to do the same thing in South Carolina. I'll be happy to take your questions.